big question for me is, obviously you guys have these amazing companies established. You had that spark, that idea. Sort of what was your next step? Because I think, probably so many of the people listening have ideas that they want to get going on. So sort of what was your breaking point and what were your first steps to really test those ideas? You can jump around if you want, or you can just go over.
I think that starting is really, it's the hardest thing. Where do you start? Because it's so overwhelming. It's like just starting a company. So I had to just get some ideas on paper, and really where I started with was my brand positioning, which really leads to a lot of other things. So I worked with a branding person who I had known previously, and we really started brainstorming about, who's the target customer, how do I want to position it, how am I making my company different from the other companies that exist out there. And through really creating the image, it helped me to really answer a lot of other questions. And then once I had that image out there, it was like a baby was being born. You kind of then started to see it take shape, and then lots of other things unfolded from there. So I started with the image and the branding and the positioning.
So for me, I had no previous background in the fashion industry, and I was in a totally different industry, but was really excited about fashion. So I had a lot to learn. So I actually went to, how did I start? I went to trade shows, went to conferences. It was all about networking. I would just talk about fashion and talk about designing and talk about socks to whoever. And that person might say, hey, you should talk to this person. And so it was just a lot of networking, a lot of learning. And through that process, I actually went to places to actually learn how to make socks. And then the idea about the brand came into play, because this is a very high-end brand. It's almost sort of like a maison in France, meaning it's very focused on excellence. And so in sourcing, I wanted to find only the very best mills in the world. So there was a whole process of sourcing mills, and that took a long time. And then there was product development, figuring out, okay, I had this idea for an aesthetic for the product, but I had no designing. I'm not a designer. I had no background in that. So how do you take this idea and sort of produce a product? So there's a lot of learning with that, and a lot of iteration in product development. And then there was a whole process of branding and figuring out the business model and all of that. So I could go on and on, but it was a lot of just learning in the beginning and networking, and then just doing it. You have to just roll your sleeves up and start doing stuff. And I made a lot of mistakes, and through those mistakes, hopefully you learn how to pivot, and that was it. It was an iteration of mistakes that got me here.
I think that's
I will take this. So in terms of how we started, we came at it from different angles. So Yawa at the time, Yawa was working in China, actually for Calvin Klein, and she was traveling a lot, and she would have to get off, leave China and take an air flight, 16-hour transatlantic air flight, and get off and go right into a client meeting. And then I, on the other end, had a very, very packed daily schedule. I'm a New Yorker that just likes to do everything I possibly can. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. So, I'll go to the gym and I'll go to work, and then after work I'll have a meeting, like a networking event, and then after that I might go rock climb, and then after that I want to have dinner with friends. I'm just one of those people, never mind apartment. So when she was working in China and I was here, we talked about these challenges, and we talked about how clothing would sort of restricted us in being able to do what we wanted to do. She needed to look really polished in her client meeting, but how do you do that after a 16-hour flight? And I needed really versatile clothing that could take me from my client meetings during the day to rock climbing, to dinner with friends. And so as we started talking about our challenges, we realized that we could possibly come up with a solution. And we think we've done that with our line. So I guess in terms of like where we began and how we took the steps, we began with just talking about our challenges and saying like, how do we fix these challenges? Like, what is the best way to fix these challenges? And that's how we came up with our brand values, which stands by high performance, very versatile clothing, high quality. It needs to be able to hold up to all those different activities. And easy care. That was a big thing for us too, because I do so many activities I don't want to bother with dry cleaning. So that's how we analyzed every challenge and then tried to fix as many of those as we could.
And I would like to add I agree with like figuring out the brand positioning, how to get started. And I guess my advice is just actually to do it, because when we first started, we had talked about wanting to do an activewear line, or like, you can talk yourself like all day long. And at the end of the day, once you start doing it, you figure out what it's going to become. And we've like shifted our whole idea since, and you just edit as you go along. And the hardest thing is to taking that first step and like just getting something out there. Done is better than perfect.
And I think what's really important to note is what you start with is never what it will end up being. Like you'll start with this idea and you'll say, this is so perfect, this is great. And then 6 months down the road, you'll look back and be like, that is not what I started with. That is not the idea that I had in mind. But, based on experiences, based on feedback, I'm moving in a direction that fits the consumer and really will be successful. So it seems like all of your ideas, came from such a personal place of need. You found this problem and you responded to the problem by creating a solution. What would you say, what foundation, in your prior experience really gave you the tools to do that? Because I think, for me at least, in my prior job, it's not at all what I'm doing currently. But there are so many skills that are applicable that I think before I made the leap, I didn't really understand how they would be applicable. And now that I've made the leap, I'm like, oh, that's really similar to what I was doing before. Oh, this relates. And I think having that faith that what you're doing now will be helpful in the end is really helpful.
I found that to be true, that I didn't realize how much I actually knew.
Mm-hmm.
So my background, I was the fashion director for Lord & Taylor for all 47 stores. Previous to that, I did product development. So I traveled to Asia and I managed ready-to-wear lines and accessories. And then after I left Lord & Taylor, I actually went to Bag Bar of Steel, which was the pioneer of the fashion rental space. And I was hired to help them take a struggling brand and help them make it fresh and exciting again. And so I went from an extremely organized corporate environment that had a lot of resources, which you actually don't realize how you take for granted when you come from an environment that has all that money and all the computer systems in place and IT teams and travel budgets and copy paper. I mean, like everything, like teams of people around you, and when you're in that environment, you're like trying to get yourself seen and heard and really want to make your mark there, going from that to a startup that has like
It's hustle.
Nothing, and you have to be extremely resourceful, and you have to pull on every single person that you've met and and how can they help you, and where do you research and learn, and so it was very interesting, like the dichotomy of both sides, and I think that just experience is really key. I think a lot of people want to just start their own thing right away. I personally wouldn't recommend that, actually. I mean, I'm not saying don't start your own thing, but I think that really, if you're going to do that, make sure you are ready for those challenges, for going into an industry that you don't know, because there's going to be a lot of challenges. I think for me personally, like having the knowledge of how the ins and outs of like the retail industry worked, buying worked, sourcing worked, wholesaling worked, pricing worked, trend forecasting worked, what those people want to see, how to understand your consumer, your marketing. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. So having that base and then going into a startup, like that just helped me, that I had that leverage of knowing all of that before I went in, versus Graham, it sounded like, you had so much to learn, which is, extremely, respectable. And not to say that I didn't, but it just, you had that extra challenge ahead of you.
You don't know how right you are. Because truth be told, I launched a year ago, but I've been working on this for over 5 years.
Wow.
5.5 years, which is much too long. In every way, it's much too long.
Well, your
and-
socks look great.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So 5 years later, you have
Yeah.
great socks.
Thank you. So yeah, and it's, I second that thought. If I had it to do over again, I would definitely go work in the industry and learn. And it's not just the knowledge and the experience that you bring to the table. It's also the contacts and the networking,
Right.
and the sort of, know how to get things done, and know who can get things done. So yeah, so it's absolutely true, and it took me a lot longer. I'd say another interesting sort of mistake that I made, among many others, is I was always in a hurry. And it was the classic tortoise and hare story. I mean, I wanted to launch the collection in 3 months. So when I would be doing branding or product development, I was pushing the mills, I was pushing everybody, and said, we gotta have this in 3 months. And sure enough, it would not be good enough. And there'd be something the matter with it. The next 3 months, do the same thing for the next 3 months. And so to me, I think one of the things that I'm trying to still learn is balancing between a sense of urgency and doing things right. And how do you find that balance? And I'm still trying to figure that out.
Especially when investors are involved too, because investors want everything now and they want you to meet your timelines and your goals, and then there's that struggle with, but it's not good enough, or it's not ready, or I don't want to put something out if I don't think my customer is going to like that, and so there's that struggle too with the timing.
The only other thing I would say to answer your question about why, or what prepared me maybe to take the leap, I guess. And I guess it was just a passion to make something, a passion to create something, and also to build a brand. To me, it's exciting and super interesting to build a brand. But at the end of the day, it's about creating something, and making something. That's really cool. And I think that's sort of in my DNA, and that's really what prepared me, so to speak.
And I think it's interesting because we're talking about we sort of said two different things in the past waves. In the first wave, we sort of said, just do it. Because you just got to throw yourself out there and test the idea. I think the difference is having a foundation. There's sort of like a foundation, and then there's the impulse to do it. So, you have to have that education, whatever you're doing. So it's reading, doing the networking. It's really submerging yourself in the idea. But then to a certain extent, you just have to pull the trigger. So I think that we're saying two different things, but we've all sort of clearly experienced, the same process.
It's the fine balance.
Yeah.
I think, again, like timing really is everything. I mean, you'll hear that over and over again. I think you have to personally pull on your intuition and decide when is this the right time. You're going to always have that voice in your head that you want to do this, you want to do this, you want to do this, but when is it right for you to do it?
And there is no perfect time.
There's no perfect time, but I think you still have to be smart about when you decide personally to do it. What have you experienced and have in your, treasure chest there?
Sorry.
It's fine. So I guess just a little bit of my background. I've been in apparel design for the past 8 years. So I guess for me, it seemed like a natural progression to do this, but having your own line is completely different than working for a company. I mean, working for a company, I can sit at my desk all day and draw and sketch and pass it off to my pattern maker, pass it off to my factory, and a sample magically appears. But running your own company, it's so much more than that. And yes, I designed the line, and we worked together to edit all the sketches, but then doing the research. I'm my own fabric person. I'm my own sourcing person. I have to go to the factories and coordinate everything. And beyond that is your own merchandiser, your own stylist, your own production person, and webmaster, and accountant, and legal advice, and everything else that comes with you're running a company. But I guess you learn a lot on the job, like you said. There's a lot of things that you kind of just pick up as you're working in the industry, and that is very, very important. And I feel very fortunate that I have spent time kind of paying my dues in the industry, because so much of what we've been able to accomplish has been through favors. And for example, the factory doing all our sample development and production is someone I had met at my very first job at Ashley Mishka, and he was like, you were so nice to me, and you were such a pleasure to work with. We're not taking on new clients, but I'm helping you as a favor because I really like you. And so you just never know when that kind of things will come into play. Just be nice to everyone.
In terms of my personal history, so I actually started a very big agency where resources are difficult. So I definitely can relate to that. But I actually went from a really big agency to a startup, and that obviously helped me because that phrase "wearing many hats" is an understatement. I was brought in to do marketing, but then I ended up doing finance, or you end up doing jobs that would never be under your normal job description, and that's something you have to get used to. I guess that startup experience was really valuable because previous to that I had been a student, I had worked at a big agency. Previous to that I was a student, and things were very structured. The startup world is totally not structured, okay? You have to be very comfortable with uncertainty. And if you're a person that's not comfortable with that, you can either do what I did and go to a startup and just see how that might change you, or you have to be really honest with yourself and say that's not for me, okay? I kind of didn't know what I was getting into, so I went there and it was full of uncertainty day to day. I mean, I just never knew what I was going to be working on, and I didn't know what role I was going to play that day. And it was a struggle for me to come from such a structured environment and then go into that. But now I'm totally grateful, and that's actually something that I prefer. And that's something that has really changed my mindset in terms of taking risks. And I don't think without that experience I would have taken this risk of doing startup, because I've been there and I know what the challenges are, and our challenges are different, but I know that I can handle them because I just had to do it before. In terms of the background and the challenges, I would say try to get, I very much believe in starting with a really great solid foundation and then sort of experimenting from there, and then seeing where that might take you actually.
And just to piggyback off of that, to add another question, I think a great way to get a foundation before you decide to launch something is to work at a startup. So have you guys hired? And what are you looking for in your first hire or your second hire? What do you need on your team? Obviously, hustle, ability to work in a lot of different, roles is huge. But, if any of our, audience members were to come to you, what would you guys be looking for in a hire?
So you're talking about actual specific job openings or
Just
personality
and characteristics, I think, more so.
For me, number one is talent. I think that just ultimately, we can talk about agility and self-motivation and entrepreneurship, which are all really important, but at the end of the day, you have to be really talented at what you do. And yes, you have to wear many hats, but you have to be really, really good at that one thing. So I would say talent, number one, is something that I look for. And then second to that, I say definitely because of the startup environment and how challenging it is, I think you have to be really mature. You have to be able to, take everything that comes to you and just learn on the fly. You have to be able to be agile and a team player. Because there's not many people on the team, so you have to be willing to, whether you like the person or don't like the person, everybody's there with that specific skill set. So, your web developer is going to have a very specific IT personality, and my, finance accounting person is going to have a very specific, not necessarily a fashion background, but really good at crunching numbers, and that's a specific personality. So I think that, then coming in from with a fashion perspective, you have to be able to work with everybody in a very small team. So that would be something that I would look for.
I'd say maybe to add to that, I would echo what was said about in an entrepreneurial environment, the number one sort of, context is uncertainty. And obviously, a small team, you need people that can wear many different hats, but uncertainty is really the environment that we kind of function in. And so the number one skill I think that I look for would be organizational skills, and discipline. Because if you bring those two things to an uncertain environment, I think you're going to get things done. Because things are always changing on the fly, etc. But if you're disciplined, you have to be organized within that environment, things are going to get done. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is people who come in and get things done.
For me, this is in general like what I've looked for in hiring in the past, not just for our company, but like previously. I actually think like attitude is very important, and I always look for people who have like a hunger. I agree with you, like talent, like yes, you need it. Like, you know, if I don't think someone's going to be able to like step up to the task, like no matter what, it's just not going to work. But I think having a really good positive attitude and willingness to learn is way more important than like how much knowledge you're bringing in, especially if you're like starting out, like looking to, you know, get your foot in the door, because I think that hunger to like always learn and be open to learning new things always makes me really excited to have someone on my team just like, oh, I want to do this, and like I don't know how, but I'll figure it out and I'll learn it. So I think that translates really well to working on teams and, you know, being on a team as well as being in a startup environment, because you just never know what you're going to have to learn. I just recently learned how to use WordPress and build a website. But you know, you just never know. So yeah.
For me, this is probably a little unusual, but I want someone very opinionated. And what I mean by that is I want someone that's going to give me feedback when I ask for it and not be afraid to do that. I don't want someone very aggressive. I don't want someone in my face telling me that I'm, you know, they're right and I'm wrong. But I definitely want someone that's opinionated and then maybe take action on that. And just to give you a little bit of background, like why that's important to me is because that's something I learned actually from the startup. I worked very closely with the founder and CEO. Okay, so like I was very young at the time, and that's a big gap in terms of experience. And when you're dealing with people like that, or perhaps in this case dealing with someone who's running their own business, they don't have time. Like they don't have time to sit there and like walk you through something. And like I think it's great when you can find someone who's, you know, nurturing and patient, but at the same time they do have to balance that with like being pressed for time. And he would ask me questions, and I was just so scared at the time that I kind of like, you know, was very hesitant in giving an answer, or very hesitant in telling him like what I thought. So it kind of comes back to confidence as well. But what I learned in that startup, and that I now also appreciate and would like in our own startup, is someone who's like, this is the direction I think we should take. This is why. Like, what do you think? And then, you know, I can make a decision right there, and then like let's go for it. Or we can, you know, go back and forth and say, well, you know, let's analyze it from this perspective or that perspective, or how are you going to solve this challenge? But I need someone that's going to step up and say, this is what I think, whether it's right or wrong, and be like confident to say like, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but this is what I think, this is the direction, and then we go with that or not. So that's the confidence and the sort of opinionated personality is something that I would look for.
I would also say preparation. It kind of bugs me when somebody comes to the table and will possibly like voice their opinion, but they have no backup for it.
That's true.
So I would say that like
Make sure you know
definitely I totally agree, because when you're a small team, like everybody's pulling their own weight, and so you have to, I agree, like you want somebody who's really confident in their decision making and their opinions, but also to be prepared with why you believe that and what, you know, why you think that's going to make a difference to this business.
So we only have 5 minutes left. But for the last question, I feel like on these panels, a lot of the time you get such a, not negative, but realistic view of what starting a business looks like. And so can you guys talk a little bit about achievements that you guys have reached where, you know, you thought you wouldn't get there and you just said, you know, looked in the mirror and were like, that's awesome, I just worked 5 years and, you know, I accomplished at least one part of something I wanted to accomplish or something I wanted to build. I think it's important to end on a positive, you know, note.
This experience has been like one of the best experiences of my life. Like, let's just say that. It's hard, but it's so worth it because you're building something of your own, and it's like I said, like your baby, you're so proud of it, you know. I think that my website I'm really proud of. It took a lot of work to do that.
You guys should check that out.
Positioning. Thank you. And just like actually doing this for myself. It's, you know, something that I wanted to do for a while, and so I'm just proud of the fact that I had the courage to start it. And I'm still really, really new. We're only like 2 months live, so you know, we don't have like tons of accomplishments just yet. But just the fact that it's live and
doing it is
a huge accomplishment. So I would say like that's really what I'm proud of. And I think I really do feel that if you do want to have your own company, I would highly encourage it. And whether or not, you know, everybody's definition of success is different. You know, for me, the fact that I did it is success enough. You know, whether it's going to be this like wildly money-making, adventure, that would just be like icing on the cake. But the fact that I did it and learned so much from it was a huge achievement.
So I launched a year ago, and still definitely struggling in terms of sales, but I am proud of a lot of things. That I did create something from nothing. It's just this huge sense of accomplishment. And more than anything else, I think what I've created is a brand. And that's pretty exciting. We've been recognized in our space, which is commonly referred to as classic men's style, as the top sock brand that's really elevating socks to a new level, a new standard that's never been elevated before. And that's being talked about by the top sort of blogger in the space. And so one little,
Yeah,
well,
that's huge.
it is huge. Now we need to convert that into sales.
Yeah.
So that's a huge challenge. I mean, it's I don't see a straight line, so we're still struggling to figure that part of it out. But so just to talk about one specific accomplishment, even more specific than that, with this top blogger who's really considered the top guy in the space. He's a big fan, and he actually approached me last year and wanted to do a collaboration style, and we did. So we collaborated on a new sock style that he promoted to his readers and his subscribers, and that was very successful. And of course, the piece that he wrote about it, he actually called it the perfect sock.
Oh, who's the blogger?
So, Simon Crompton.
Okay.
And his blog is permanentstyle.co.uk. So that was pretty cool.
I think what you just noticed there is entrepreneurs' inability to ever talk about achievement without failure. I mean, it's just so true. There's always so much more you can do and so much more, we want to do, but,
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's the
at the end-
struggle, is
at the
patting
end-
yourself on the back without an asterisk.
That's true.
I guess for us, well, I don't know if you think this, but we just most recently wrapped up our Kickstarter campaign 2 weeks ago.
That was amazing.
So, I'm super excited about that. We ended up raising over 150% of our ask.
Wow.
So that will definitely give us, the push forward to finish the first round of production and set up e-commerce. So I'm very excited about that. We had a lot of back and forth, like whether we should do it, because there's always the possibility of failing publicly, which is something you don't want to have to deal with. But I feel so grateful and happy that we ended up
That's
doing
amazing.
that.
That is so amazing.